It stole his face. A park ranger's impossible double rescue horror story. Welcome back to the Wilderness Protocol. My name is Elias, and for the last 15 years, I've been a park ranger. I've worked in the sweeping deserts of the Southwest and the dense, humid forests of the Southeast. But for the last 5 years, I've been stationed here in the sprawling ancient woodlands of the Pacific Northwest. This is a land of giants, Douglas firs and western red cedars that were old when the first European settlers arrived, scraping the sky and blocking out the sun. The forest floor is a perpetual twilight, a soft, damp carpet of moss and ferns. It's beautiful, in a way that's both awe-inspiring and deeply intimidating. The kind of beauty that reminds you how small you are, how insignificant. Most days here are quiet, predictable. You deal with tourists who don't pack enough water, you clear fallen trees from trails after a storm, you track wildlife populations. It's a life of routine, governed by the slow, steady rhythm of the seasons. You get used to the silence, to the solitude. You learn to read the language of the woods, the snap of a twig, the call of a raven, the scent of rain on dry earth. But some things the woods don't teach you. Some things have no language. They exist in the spaces between the silence, in the shadows that the sun can't touch. I'm recording this because I need to get it out. I need someone else to know what happened. Official reports are clean, sterile things. They have lines and boxes for cause of incident, weather conditions, subject's physical state. They have no lines for the impossible. No boxes for a horror that defies every protocol you've ever learned. The official report says I performed 2 successful search and rescue operations for a missing hiker named Leo Hayes. That's the truth. But it's not the whole truth. What it doesn't say is that I rescued the exact same hiker, from the exact same spot, under the exact same bizarre circumstances, 1 week apart. And it doesn't say what I brought back the second time. Wasn't Leo. So pour yourself something strong. Settle in. Because I need to tell you what really happened out there, by the base of the old sentinel pine. I need to tell you about the man I rescued, and the thing that wore his face. Started, as these things often do, on a Tuesday, mid-October. The air was turning crisp, carrying the smell of wood smoke and decay. The park was in its shoulder season, that quiet time between the summer rush and the winter snows. The tourists were mostly gone, leaving the trails to the serious hikers and the locals. My morning had been standard procedure. I was in my truck, bumping along a fire road on the eastern boundary of the park, checking on a reported washout. The coffee in my thermos was lukewarm, and the dispatcher's voice on the radio was a familiar, crackling presence. Ranger 2, this is dispatch. How copy? I keyed the mic. Solid copy, dispatch. Go ahead. Got a call from the sheriff's office. They received a welfare check request for a hiker. Name's Leo Hayes, male 28. His car's been parked at the Sentinel Pine Trailhead for 3 days. His mother hasn't heard from him. He was only supposed to be out for a day hike. I sighed, a familiar weariness settling over me. Day hikers getting turned around is the bread and butter of search and rescue. One overconfidence is a killer. People see a sunny afternoon and think the woods are their backyard. They wander off trail for a better photo, miss a switchback, and suddenly the sun is going down and every tree looks the same. Sentinel Pine, I confirmed, my mind already mapping the area. That's my sector. What was his intended route? Unknown. Ranger 2. Mother just said he liked that trail. No itinerary was left with family or friends. Another sigh. Rule number 1. Always leave an itinerary. It's the single most important piece of information for a rescue team. Without it, you're looking for a needle in a 1,000-acre haystack. All right, dispatch. I'm about 20 minutes from the trailhead. I'll check the vehicle, see if he left a note on the dash. I'll start a preliminary search of the main loop. Keep me posted if you get any more intel. Roger that, Ranger 2. Be safe out there. The Sentinel Pine Trail is one of our most popular. It's a 5-mile loop that's not too strenuous, leading to a magnificent old-growth pine that's been a local landmark for centuries. But it has its hazards. The back half of the loop dips into a steep, rocky canyon where the trail can be hard to follow. Moss-covered rocks are slick as ice, and the tree canopy is so thick that GPS signals often drop out. It's a place that commands respect. When I arrived at the trailhead, the car was exactly where the sheriff said it would be. A modest blue sedan, gathering a fine layer of pine needles on its windshield. I peered through the driver's side window. Empty water bottle, a crumpled fast food bag, a dog-eared paperback on the passenger seat. No note. I geared up. Standard SAR pack. Extra water, high-energy food, first aid kit, a powerful headlamp, space blanket, signaling mirror, GPS unit, and my radio. I also grabbed the hiker assist kit, which includes things like blister pads and electrolyte gels for people who are found tired but uninjured. I signed the patrol log, noting my start time and intended search area. This is all by the book, a routine I could do in my sleep. You follow the protocol because the protocol is what keeps you and the people you're looking for alive. Dispatch, Ranger 2. Vehicle confirmed. No itinerary left in the car. Commencing search of Sentinel Pine Loop, counterclockwise. I'll check in at 1-hour intervals. Copy 2. Good luck. The first hour was uneventful. The trail was quiet, the air still. I called out his name every few minutes, my voice swallowed by the immense silence of the forest. Leo Hayes, Park Ranger. Can you hear me? Only the chattering of a squirrel and the whisper of the wind in the high branches answered. I was scanning the ground constantly, looking for any sign. A fresh footprint in a patch of mud, a broken branch, a dropped piece of gear. Anything to show which way he might have gone. Nothing. It was in the second hour, as I descended into the canyon, that the feeling started. It's a hard thing to describe. A subtle shift in the atmosphere. The woods are never truly silent, but this was a different kind of quiet. A heavy, listening quiet. The birds seemed to have stopped singing. The hair on my arms prickled, a feeling I've learned to trust over the years. It's the same feeling you get moments before a lightning strike or when you realize you're being watched by a predator you can't see. I slowed my pace, my hand resting on the grip of the bear spray holstered on my hip. We have black bears and the occasional cougar in the park. They're almost always more scared of you than you are of them, but you don't take chances. I rounded a bend, the trail flanked by a sheer rock face on one side and a steep drop-off on the other. And that's when I saw it. A single, bright orange energy bar wrapper, lying half-submerged in the damp moss a few feet off the trail. My heart gave a little kick. It was clean, not faded or weathered. It hadn't been here long. I knelt, careful not to disturb the ground around it. I called it in. Dispatch, Ranger 2. I have a possible sign. An energy bar wrapper, looks recent. Just off the trail near the base of the canyon. Sending you my coordinates. Copy that too. Stand by. This was the first real clue. It suggested he'd stopped here for a break. But why leave the trail? I scanned the area below the wrapper. It was a steep, treacherous slope of loose rock and tangled roots, leading down into the darkest part of the ravine. No sane hiker would go down there on purpose. Leo, I shouted, my voice now laced with more urgency. Leo, can you hear me? And for the first time I got a response. It was faint, so faint I almost missed it. A weak, reedy cry from somewhere down below. Help! Adrenaline surged through me, sharp and cold. Dispatch. I have voice contact. Subject is responsive. He's down in the ravine, sounds weak. I'm gonna need to rig a simple rope assist to get down to him safely. Notify Medivac to be on standby. Roger, Ranger 2. Contact made. Standby for Medivac confirmed. Be careful. The protocol is clear. You don't become a second victim. I found a sturdy tree to use as an anchor, uncoiled the rope from my pack, and began the slow, careful process of rappelling down the slick, unstable slope. Every foot was a calculated risk. Leo, keep talking to me, I called out. Let me know you're still with me. Here. The voice was closer now, but still disturbingly frail. I finally reached the bottom of the ravine. It was at least 10 degrees cooler down here, and the air was thick with the smell of wet stone and rotting leaves. The canopy overhead was a solid ceiling of green and black, plunging the area into deep shadow. And there he was. He was wedged between two large, moss-covered boulders near a small, gurgling creek. He was on his back, one leg bent at an unnatural angle. This was Leo Hayes. He matched the driver's license photo the sheriff's office had texted me. Early 30s, dark hair, a short beard. He was pale, shivering, and his eyes were wide with a mixture of pain and relief. Hey there, Leo, I said, my voice calm and reassuring, the way they train you. My name's Elias. I'm a park ranger. We're going to get you out of here. I did a quick assessment. His leg was clearly broken, a nasty compound fracture. He was dehydrated and showing signs of hypothermia. But he was alive. What happened, son? I asked as I carefully cut away his pant leg to get a better look at the injury. He licked his chapped lips, his gaze darting nervously into the shadows around us. I don't know, he whispered. I was on the trail, and then I was falling. Did you slip? He shook his head, a gesture that seemed to take a monumental effort. No, I saw something. Something? An animal? I don't know what it was, he stammered, his eyes huge and dark. It was tall, just for a second, in the trees. It made me look away from the path. Then, nothing. I woke up down here. My leg. I didn't press him. Head injuries can cause confusion and false memories. Shock and hypothermia do strange things to the mind. The priority was stabilization and extraction. I splinted his leg, wrapped him in the space blanket, and got some warm electrolytes into him. As I worked, that feeling of being watched returned, stronger than ever. I kept glancing over my shoulder, my flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. I saw nothing but trees and rock, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were not alone down there. The silence was heavy, unnatural. It felt like the forest was holding its breath. The extraction was by the book. With the help of the rope system and a lot of slow, painstaking effort, I managed to get him back up to the trail. The Medivac team met us at the trailhead and airlifted him to the hospital. As the helicopter's blades beat the air, whipping leaves and dirt into a frenzy, Leo grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. It's still out there, he hissed, his eyes wild with terror. Don't go back there alone. Patted his hand. You're safe now, Leo. Just a bad fall. But as I watched the chopper disappear over the tree-line, his words echoed in my head. I walked back to my truck, the setting sun casting long, distorted shadows across the empty parking lot. I couldn't shake the chill that had settled deep in my bones. It wasn't just the cold of the ravine. It was something else, something ancient and unsettling. I filed my report, attributing Leo's disorientation to a possible concussion from the fall. Case closed. Another successful rescue. But that night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those dark woods, felt that heavy, watching silence, and I saw the terror in Leo Hayes's eyes. Little did I know it was only the beginning. The week that followed was strange. On the surface, everything was normal. The park continued its slow drift into autumn. The days grew shorter, the nights colder. I went about my duties, my boots crunching on carpets of fallen leaves. I wrote a few tickets, gave directions to a lost family of German tourists, and spent an entire afternoon clearing a beaver dam that was flooding a service road. It was the mundane, reassuring rhythm of a ranger's life. But underneath it all, a current of unease hummed, low and persistent. The memory of the rescue clung to me like the damp forest mist. I couldn't shake the feeling of that ravine, the profound, listening silence and the stark terror in Leo Hayes's eyes. I'd been on hundreds of SAR calls. I'd seen people in all states of distress, panicked, injured, resigned. But this was different. This wasn't just fear of injury or being lost. It was a primal, gut-wrenching dread, as if he'd looked into an abyss and the abyss had looked back. I called the hospital the next day to check on him, a standard follow-up. The nurse told me he was stable. The leg was bad, requiring surgery and a lot of pins, but he'd make a full recovery. She added, in a slightly lower voice, that he'd been having some trouble. Nightmares. He kept waking up screaming about something tall in the trees, something with a face that wasn't a face. The doctors were chalking it up to post-traumatic stress and the heavy painkillers. It made sense. And yet, it didn't settle my mind. I found myself avoiding the Sentinel Pine Trail area. When my patrol route took me near there, I'd find a reason to turn down a different fire road. I told myself it was because the memory of the difficult extraction was still fresh. But I knew, deep down, that wasn't it. I was avoiding the feeling of that place, the weight of its silence. I tried to rationalize it. I've spent more time alone in the wilderness than most people spend in their own homes. I know that solitude can play tricks on your mind. Your senses heighten. You start to personify the sounds of the forest. The wind moaning through the pines can sound like a whisper. A shadow cast by a moving branch can look like a lurking figure. I'd experienced it before, but this felt different, felt external, real. Midweek, I was in the ranger station, catching up on paperwork. The station is a small, rustic cabin, miles from the nearest town. It's my office and, during my shifts, my home. On a whim, I pulled up the park's incident archives. I started searching for reports connected to the Sentinel Pine Trail. I was looking for a pattern, anything to explain the lingering sense of wrongness. I went back years, then decades. There were the usual things. Lost hikers, minor injuries, a few bear sightings. Then I found something from the late 1970s. A ranger, now long retired, had filed a supplemental report after a hiker went missing for 2 days near the same ravine. The hiker was found dehydrated and disoriented, much like Leo. In the ranger's notes, scribbled in the margin, was a curious line. Subject claims he was led astray by a tall man who walked between the trees. Subject is clearly suffering from exposure-related hallucinations. My fingers froze over the keyboard. A tall man who walked between the trees. The hair on my arms stood up. I kept digging. There were other scattered accounts, dismissed as folklore or delusion. A report from the 90s mentioned a group of campers who abandoned their site in the middle of the night, claiming they were terrorized by unnerving whistles and the sight of something impossibly tall moving just at the edge of their firelight. Another, from just 10 years ago, involved a search for a woman who vanished from the trail. They found her 3 days later, miles from where she should have been, with no memory of how she got there. She just kept repeating that the quiet was too loud. None of it was concrete. They were just whispers, fragments of stories separated by years, easily explained away by conventional logic. But when strung together, they painted a disturbing picture. It felt like I was tracing the edges of a shadow that had been haunting these woods for a very long time. That night, the feeling of being watched returned. I was sitting at the small table in my station, trying to eat a bowl of chili, but my appetite was gone. I kept looking out the window, into the impenetrable blackness of the forest. The station is surrounded by a small clearing, but beyond that, the woods press in, a solid wall of darkness. I felt exposed, like an actor on a brightly lit stage, being observed by an unseen audience. I got up and methodically checked all the locks on the doors and windows, something I rarely do. I pulled the curtains shut, but it didn't help. The feeling was inside with me now. I sat in my chair, the silence of the cabin broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and the frantic beating of my own heart. I thought about Leo Hayes's words, "Don't go back there alone." The rest of the week passed in a blur of low-grade anxiety. I did my job, I followed my routines, but a part of my mind was always listening, always watching. I felt like a prey animal that has scented a predator on the wind. I started carrying a high-lumen flashlight with me even during the day, its weight a small but tangible comfort against the encroaching shadows. By Monday, a full 6 days after the rescue, I had almost convinced myself it was all in my head. I was tired, overworked. The stress of a difficult SAR, combined with digging into old, spooky stories, had primed my imagination. I needed a good night's sleep, a day off. I needed to get out of the woods and see some concrete and streetlights. I was finishing my final patrol of the day, driving back towards the station as twilight bled across the sky, turning the clouds to shades of bruised purple and orange. I felt a sense of relief. The week was almost over. Tomorrow I was off. And then the radio crackled to life. "Ranger 2, this is dispatch. How copy?" The voice was the same, the call sign was the same. But my blood ran cold. I knew, with a sudden, sickening certainty, what was coming next. I picked up the mic, my hand trembling slightly. "Go ahead, dispatch. Ranger 2, we have a problem. I'm not sure how to say this. We've received a call from the sheriff's office." There was a pause. The dispatcher sounded hesitant, confused. "They got a 911 call. It was bounced off a tower on the ridge before it cut out." The caller was male, sounded weak. All they could make out was a name and a location. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. I already knew the answer, but I had to hear it. "What was the name, dispatch?" Another pause, longer this time. I could hear the rustle of papers on her end. The caller identified himself as Leo Hayes. He said he was injured at the base of Sentinel Pine. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. For a moment, I couldn't process the words. It was like my brain was refusing to accept the input, flagging it as an error, a glitch in the system. "Dispatch, repeat that," I said, my voice low and tight. "I know how this sounds, Elias." The dispatcher, a woman named Sarah whom I'd known for years, said, her professional calm fraying at the edges. The caller identified himself as Leo Hayes. "He's reporting an injury near Sentinel Pine." The call dropped, but they pinged his location. "It's in the same ravine you pulled him from last week." I pulled the truck over, the tires crunching on the gravel shoulder. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. A prank? A cruel, elaborate hoax? But who would do that? And how would they know the specific details? A mistake? Maybe it was a different hiker with a similar name. "Sarah, that's impossible," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Leo Hayes is in a hospital bed in the city. He had surgery on his leg 3 days ago. He can't even walk." "I know." I called the hospital while the sheriff was on the other line. I confirmed it. He's there. In his room. The charge nurse spoke to him not 5 minutes ago. A wave of cold dread washed over me, so intense it was nauseating. The forest outside my window, once a place of comfort and familiarity, suddenly felt alien and menacing. The last light of day was failing, and the shadows between the trees were deepening into pitch blackness. So who the hell is on the phone? I whispered, more to myself than to her. We don't know, Sarah said. But someone is down there. The call sounded legitimate. He sounded like he was in real distress. We can't ignore it. You're the closest unit. She was right. Protocol is protocol. A distress call is a distress call. You respond. It doesn't matter if it makes sense. You go. Roger. Dispatch, I said, the words feeling like gravel in my mouth. I'm on my way. But Sarah, be ready. Something is very wrong here. I've already got the chief on the line and a second ranger en route for backup. But he's an hour out. Be careful, Elias. Please. The drive to the Sentinel Pine trailhead was the longest of my life. Every rational part of my brain was screaming that this was a trap. The old stories I'd read, the ranger's note about a tall man, Leo's terror-filled warning. It all coalesced into a single, horrifying thought. The thing he saw was real, and it was luring me back. But what was I supposed to do? Tell dispatch I wouldn't go because I was scared of a ghost story? I was a park ranger. This was my job. As I pulled into the now familiar parking lot, my headlights cut through the darkness and landed on something that made my stomach drop. The blue sedan. Leo Hayes' car. It was parked in the exact same spot it had been a week ago. I just stared at it, my mind refusing to comprehend. I had personally watched it being towed away after the first rescue. I had the impound lot receipt in my files back at the station. It was impossible. Yet there it was. It wasn't a similar car. The license plate was the same. A small dent on the rear bumper. The faded sticker for a local radio station on the back window. It was his car. Dispatch, Ranger 2, I said into the radio, my voice strained. You're not going to believe this. The vehicle. It's here. What are you talking about, Elias? The tow report was filed last Tuesday. I'm looking at it, Sarah. It's here. In the parking lot. Same make, model, same plate. It's here. The silence on the other end of the radio was deafening. There was no more denying it. I was walking into something that did not operate by the rules of the world I knew. I geared up, my movements stiff and automatic. This time, I did something I hadn't done on a SAR mission in over a decade. I unlocked the rifle case bolted to the floor of my truck and pulled out my service shotgun. I loaded it with slugs, the crisp shuck-shuck of the pump action echoing in the silent lot. It felt inadequate against whatever I was facing, but it was better than nothing. I started down the trail, the powerful beam of my headlamp cutting a tunnel through the oppressive darkness. The woods were different at night. Sounds were amplified. The rustle of a leaf sounded like footsteps, the hoot of an owl like a warning. The feeling of being watched was back, 1,000 times stronger than before. It felt like every tree was an eye, every shadow a mouth ready to swallow me. I moved faster than last time, my senses on high alert. I called out the name, my voice sounding small and foolish against the vast, dark wilderness. Leo Hayes, Park Ranger. And just as before, as I reached the descent into the ravine, I heard the reply. Help. Me. It was the same voice, the same weak, pleading tone. It was coming from the same spot. It was a perfect, horrifying echo of the week before. My blood ran cold, but my training took over. I rigged the ropes, checked my anchors, and began my descent. My shotgun was slung tight across my back, its weight a cold, hard reality against my spine. As I lowered myself into the ravine, the uncanny feeling intensified. It wasn't just similar to the last rescue. It was identical. A strange sense of déjà vu washed over me. I noticed the same loose rock I'd had to navigate around, the same oddly shaped tree root I'd used as a handhold. It was like I was replaying a scene from a movie, frame for agonizing frame. I reached the bottom. My headlamp beam swept across the damp ground, the gurgling creek, and the two large boulders. And there, wedged between them in the exact same position, was Leo Hayes. I froze, my hand hovering over the stock of my shotgun. It was him. Same face, same dark hair, same build. He was wearing the same clothes, a red fleece jacket, dark cargo pants now torn and muddied. His leg was bent at the same sickening, unnatural angle. It was a perfect, impossible replica of the scene from last Tuesday. For a moment, I was paralyzed by sheer cognitive dissonance. My mind was screaming, "This can't be real. Run." But he looked up at me, his eyes wide, and the expression on his face was one of pure, unadulterated relief. "Oh, thank God," he breathed, his voice trembling. I thought no one would find me." I took a hesitant step forward, my flashlight beam fixed on his face. This is where the script should have deviated. This is where I expected a monster, a distorted face, glowing eyes. But there was nothing like that. It was just a man, an injured, terrified man. "Leo?" I asked, the name feeling foreign in my mouth. "Leo Hayes?" "Yes," he said, wincing in pain. "My leg. I think it's broken. I was on the trail, and then I fell. I've been down here for hours." It was the same story, almost word for word. My mind latched onto the differences, searching for any crack in this impossible facade. His voice, was it a little flatter? A little more rehearsed? The look in his eyes. Last week, Leo's eyes were wide with a frantic, animal terror. This man's eyes were wide, yes, but the emotion behind them felt shallow, like a photograph of fear, not the thing itself. This was the uncanny valley in the flesh, something that looks so close to human that the tiny imperfections make it profoundly monstrous. "Stay calm, son," I said, my ranger persona clicking back into place like armor. "We're going to get you out of here." I knelt beside him, forcing myself to go through the motions. "What's the last thing you remember?" He looked at me, a faint, placid smile on his face that didn't reach his eyes. "I remember the trees," he said, his voice a soft, melodic monotone. "The tall, tall trees. And the quiet. It's so wonderfully quiet down here." A chill that had nothing to do with the cold of the ravine went through me. The real Leo had been terrified of the quiet. I began my assessment, my hands moving with practiced efficiency. But my mind was a whirlwind of terror and disbelief. I had to touch him, to splint the leg. The thought of it filled me with a deep, primal revulsion. As I reached for his leg, my sleeve rode up, exposing my watch. He glanced down at it. "Is that the time?" he asked, his tone one of mild curiosity. "It feels like no time has passed at all." His eyes lingered on my watch, and for a split second, something in them shifted. A flicker of, what? Hunger? Calculation? It was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that same shallow, placid look of a victim. But I had seen it. This thing, whatever it was not Leo Hayes. It was wearing his skin like a suit, and it was playing a part. And I, the rescuer, had just walked right onto its stage. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get away, to leave this thing in the ravine and run. But I couldn't. There was the protocol, the maddening, logical voice of my training that said this was a human being in distress until proven otherwise. And there was another, darker thought. What would happen if I did run? Would it just lie here and wait for the next hiker? For my backup, who was still 30 minutes away? No, I had to play the part. I had to get it out of the ravine, away from its den, and into the light where I could figure out what the hell I was dealing with. The process of getting Leo up to the trail was a slow-motion nightmare. Every touch felt like a violation. His skin was cool and had a strange, clay-like texture under my gloves. When I splinted his leg, he didn't cry out in pain as the real Leo had. He just watched me with those placid, observant eyes, a faint, serene smile on his lips. It was the most unnerving thing I'd ever witnessed. He was a perfect mimic, but it was like a machine trying to replicate human emotion without any understanding of it. "You're very efficient," he commented as I tightened the straps on the splint. His voice was calm, devoid of the pained gasps that should have accompanied the procedure. "You've done this before." "It's my job," I grunted, avoiding his gaze. The ascent was grueling. He was heavier than he looked, a dead, dense weight that seemed to suck the energy right out of me. He didn't help, didn't try to shift his weight to make it easier. He was just cargo. All the while, he kept up a soft, unnerving monologue. "The forest is so lovely at night," he'd say. "So much to see when you really look. Have you ever noticed how the moss grows only on the north side of the trees? Perfect compass. Nature is full of such clever little rules." It sounded like a textbook, like someone reading facts about the wilderness without any actual experience of it. The real Leo, a day hiker who'd gotten lost, wouldn't have been delivering a nature lecture with a compound fracture. When we finally crested the lip of the ravine and got back onto the main trail, I was panting, drenched in sweat. He, on the other hand, looked exactly the same. Pale, serene, not a single bead of sweat on his brow despite the ordeal. "Dispatch Ranger 2, I said into my radio, my voice raspy. "Subject is on the trail. We are proceeding to the trailhead. ETA. 20 minutes. "Copy that, Elias." Sarah's voice came back, tight with worry. "Your backup is 5 minutes out. How is he?" I looked at the thing sitting propped against a tree, its head cocked to one side as it listened to the radio transmission. "He's stable," I said, choosing my words carefully. "Condition is unchanged." "What about his leg?" "The leg is splinted. He's not complaining of any pain." The thing smiled its serene, empty smile. "He's very good at his job," it said, loud enough for the radio to pick up. "A real professional." The silence on Sarah's end told me she'd heard. The walk back to the trailhead was the most terrifying 20 minutes of my life. I had fabricated a makeshift crutch for him out of a sturdy branch, and he used it with an eerie proficiency, hopping along the trail beside me. The silence of the woods pressed in, broken only by the rhythmic thump-tap of his progress. He started asking questions, not about the rescue or the hospital or his family, but about me. "How long have you been a ranger, Elias?" he asked, his voice smooth as river stone. "A long time," I said curtly. "Do you enjoy the solitude? Or does it get lonely out here, all by yourself?" "I manage." "It must be hard," it continued, ignoring my clipped responses. "Being the only one for miles, responsible for all this emptiness. Anyone could get lost out here. Anything could happen, and no one would know." The way it said anything sent a sliver of ice down my spine. My backup, a young, capable ranger named Miller, was waiting for us at the trailhead, his own shotgun held at a low ready. His face was a mask of confusion and apprehension as his flashlight beam fell on the hiker. "Elias, what the hell?" he breathed, looking from the hiker to the identical blue sedan in the parking lot. Just help me get him into my truck, Miller, I said through gritted teeth. We need to get him out of here. Now. We loaded the thing into the passenger seat of my patrol truck. It didn't protest. It simply settled into the seat, its hands resting calmly in its lap, and watched us. I'll follow you back to the station, Miller said, his eyes wide. What's the play here? The play, I said, lowering my voice, is that we treat this as a standard rescue. We do everything by the book. We get him to the station, we wait for the sheriff and the ambulance that Sarah has already called. We do not, under any circumstances, let him out of our sight. And you keep that shotgun handy. Miller just nodded, his face pale in the flashing lights of his own vehicle. The drive to the ranger station was surreal. The thing sat beside me, silent now, its head turning slowly as it scanned the dark tree line passing by the window. Its movements were too smooth, too deliberate, not human. Then, it turned its head and looked directly at me. You're afraid, it stated, not as a question but as a fact. The serene smile was gone. In its place was a look of cold, clinical curiosity. Your heart rate is elevated. Your breathing is shallow. Your pupils are dilated. A classic fear response. I gripped the wheel, my knuckles white. I'm fine. I don't think you are, it said, its voice dropping to a near whisper. It leaned closer, and the air in the cab grew cold. I can smell it on you. It smells delicious. I slammed on the brakes. The truck skidded to a halt in the middle of the fire road. I turned to face it, my hand on the handle of my sidearm. What are you? I demanded, my voice shaking with a mixture of rage and terror. The thing's face seemed to shift. For a split second, the features blurred, the skin seeming to loosen around the underlying bone structure, like a mask that was about to slip. The eyes darkened into empty black pits. The mouth stretched into a smile that was far too wide, filled with teeth that were just a little too sharp. It wasn't a monster from a movie. It was something far worse. It was a subtle, biological horror. A predator that had evolved to be the perfect imitation, the perfect lure. And then, just as quickly, the illusion snapped back into place. It was just Leo again, looking confused and scared by my sudden stop. What's wrong? He asked, his voice full of mock concern. Are you okay? I didn't answer. I put the truck in gear and drove, my foot pressing the accelerator to the floor. The ranger station, once a symbol of my isolation, was now the only goal. A place with lights, with locked doors, with other people. It was a tiny island of sanity in a world that had suddenly become a nightmare. I wasn't rescuing a hiker anymore. I was transporting a monster, and I had willingly invited it out of the woods. The ranger station's floodlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the small clearing and the log cabin station in a stark, artificial glare. It had never looked so welcoming, so beautifully mundane. Miller pulled in right behind me, his headlights pinning my truck in their beams. The plan was simple, and we had confirmed it with the chief and Sarah over the radio on the drive back. Get the subject inside, into the station's small, windowless holding room, and wait for the authorities. The holding room isn't really a cell. It's more of a reinforced space for temporarily detaining poachers or unruly individuals until the sheriff can arrive. It has a heavy steel door and solid walls. It was the closest thing I had to a cage. Getting the thing out of the truck and into the station was the longest 50 feet of my life. It leaned on me and Miller, its weight still feeling unnaturally dense. It was docile, cooperative, that faint, unnerving smile back on its face. It seemed to be enjoying the charade. We guided it through the main office and towards the holding room door. In here, please, I said, my voice clipped and professional. Just until the ambulance arrives to take a proper look at that leg. It looked at the heavy door, then at me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something new in its eyes. Resistance. Is that really necessary? It asked, its tone still light, but with a new hard edge. I'm perfectly comfortable out here with you. It's protocol, Miller said, his voice firmer than I expected. He was holding his shotgun, the barrel pointed at the floor but ready. Injured persons need to be in a secure, quiet area. The thing's gaze shifted to the shotgun, and its smile tightened. Of course, it said, the word drawn out. Protocol. It hopped into the room, and I slammed the heavy steel door shut behind it. The sound of the deadbolt locking echoed in the silent station like a cannon shot. For a moment, Miller and I just stood there, breathing heavily, the adrenaline finally starting to recede, leaving a cold, shaky exhaustion in its wake. Jesus, Elias, Miller whispered, running a hand over his face. Its eyes. It's like there's nothing behind them. Radio Sarah, I ordered, my voice low. Tell her the subject is secure. Confirm the ETA on the sheriff and the ambulance. And tell them to come armed and prepared for a biohazard situation. I don't know how else to describe it. While Miller made the call, I went to the small observation slit in the holding room door. It's a one-way mirror designed so you can see in but they can't see out. My heart was pounding as I peered inside. The thing was not sitting on the bench we had provided. It was standing in the center of the small, bare room. Standing, on both feet, my breath hitched in my throat. I watched, mesmerized with horror, as it put its full weight on its broken leg. There was no pain, no instability. It then slowly, deliberately, bent the leg back and forth, rotating the ankle. The leg was perfectly fine. Then, it reached down and began to unstrap the splint I had so carefully applied. Its movements were fluid, precise. Not the fumbling of a man, but the deftness of something disassembling a piece of machinery it understood intimately. It laid the splint neatly on the floor. Then it looked directly at the observation slit. Directly at me. Couldn't see me, I knew that. But it knew I was there. It smiled. A slow, knowing, predatory grin that was nothing like the placid mask it had worn before. This was its true face. The face of the thing from my truck. The wide mouth. The dark, intelligent eyes full of ancient malice. Teen. It raised a hand and tapped the glass of the one-way mirror. Tap, tap, tap. Playful, taunting gesture. It was telling me it knew the rules of my little game. And it wasn't impressed. I stumbled back from the door, my heart hammering against my ribs. Miller, I choked out. Get away from the door. Miller, who had just finished his radio call, looked at me, his face pale. What is it? It knows we're watching. The leg. It's fine. It was all a trick. A performance. We backed away from the door, putting a large metal desk between us and it. The station, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. We hadn't caged a monster. We had been caged with it. The next hour was a new kind of hell. We could hear it moving around in the room, not pacing like a man would. There were strange, soft, scraping sounds. A low, guttural humming that seemed to vibrate through the very foundations of the building. And then, there was the voice. It started talking, its voice carrying clearly through the steel door. It wasn't talking to us, not at first. It was practicing. My leg. I think it's broken. It would say, in a perfect imitation of the hiker's panicked voice. Then it would repeat it, but in a slightly different tone. Higher pitched, more desperate. Then it would switch to my voice. It's my job, it said. My own curt response echoed back at me with flawless accuracy. I'm a park ranger. We're going to get you out of here. It was cycling through the conversations we'd had. testing the words, the inflections, the emotions. It was learning. It was a predator honing its camouflage. It mimicked Miller's voice, Sarah's voice from the radio, the sound of the wind in the pines, the cry of a hawk. 1516, it was a sonic chameleon, absorbing the sounds of its environment and turning them into weapons. "Let me out, Elias," it suddenly said, its voice now its own again, low and persuasive, right up against the door. "This is a misunderstanding. I'm just a hiker. My name is Leo Hayes. My mother is worried about me. You have to let me go. It's the protocol." It was using our rules, our own logic, against us, twisting it into a mockery. The scraping sound started again, louder this time. It was coming from the bottom of the door. I crept forward and risked a glance. What I saw made me physically ill. A dark, thick, viscous fluid was seeping from under the door. It wasn't blood. It was black and tar-like, and it sizzled faintly as it touched the wooden floor. And from within this substance, small, white, root-like tendrils were emerging, probing the tiny gap between the door and the frame. They were testing the lock, the hinges. They were trying to find a way out. The sheriff's cars and the ambulance finally pulled up, their sirens screaming through the night, a welcome assault of noise and light. 2 deputies, a grizzled veteran named Corbin and a younger officer, burst in, weapons drawn. "What the hell is going on, Elias?" Corbin demanded, taking in the scene. Me and Miller, backed against a wall, shotguns raised, pointing at a locked door. "It's in there," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "But it's not a man. Don't open that door." Just then, a loud bang reverberated from the holding room, followed by the screech of tortured metal. The thing had thrown its full weight against the door, denting it outwards. "Open this door!" it screamed, no longer mimicking anyone, but in a voice that was a terrifying chorus of every voice it had ever copied, layered and distorted into a sound of pure rage. "You cannot keep me. These woods are mine." Another thunderous bang hit the door, and the lock mechanism groaned in protest. We were out of time. The cage was not going to hold. That final, furious assault on the door was the turning point. Faced with the undeniable evidence of a superhuman force trying to break out, Deputy Corbin made a call. There was no more talk of ambulances or rescue protocols. This was now a containment situation. He ordered his younger partner and the paramedics to stay back while he, Miller, and I approached the groaning steel door. The black, corrosive ooze was still seeping from underneath, and the entire frame was visibly buckled. Another slam and the lock would fail. We didn't have a plan. What plan could there be against something like that? All we had was the cold, heavy reality of the shotguns in our hands. "On my mark," Corbin said, his voice grim. "We open the door and we light it up. Aim for the center of mass. Don't stop until you're empty." But before he could give the word, the noises from inside the room stopped. The violent banging ceased. The chorus of screams died away. An abrupt, profound silence fell over the station. It was the same heavy, listening silence I'd felt in the ravine. We stood there, frozen, for what felt like an eternity. The only sound was our own ragged breathing. "What's it doing?" Miller whispered. "I don't know," I replied, my eyes fixed on the damaged door. "But I don't like it." After another long minute, Corbin made a decision. He held up a hand, signaling for us to hold our positions, and crept towards the observation slit. He wiped the condensation from the small pane of glass and peered inside. He was silent for a long time. Then he let out a slow, disbelieving breath. "It's gone," he said, his voice a mixture of confusion and awe. "What do you mean, gone?" I demanded. "It's a solid room. There's no other way out." Corbin stepped back from the door, his face ashen. "See for yourself." I moved forward, my heart pounding, and looked through the slit. The room was empty. The splint I had made lay neatly on the floor. The walls were bare. There was no sign of the creature. But on the floor, in the center of the room, was a large, wet patch of the black, viscous fluid. It was slowly, almost imperceptibly, being absorbed back into the concrete floor, leaving behind a dark, ugly stain. It hadn't broken out. It had seeped away, dissolved, gone back into whatever dark, unseen space it had come from. The official story, the one that went into the reports, was carefully constructed. The 911 call was logged as a malicious hoax. The damage to the ranger station was attributed to a panicked, unidentified vagrant who was apprehended and subsequently escaped custody. The car in the parking lot, a clerical error at the impound lot, towed away again before dawn. They tidied it all up, smoothed over the impossibilities with the bland plaster of bureaucracy. No one wants to believe in monsters, especially not the people paid to keep the world orderly and safe. Leo Hayes, the real Leo Hayes, was released from the hospital a few weeks later. I never spoke to him again. I heard he moved out of state, wanting to put as much distance as possible between himself and these woods. I can't say I blame him. As for me, I'm still here. I requested to stay. Someone has to watch. The park is my home, but it's also my prison. I walk the trails, I do my job, but I'm always listening, always waiting. The stain on the floor of the holding room is still there, a dark, permanent reminder of the night the monster came inside. Sometimes, on quiet nights when the wind is just right, I think I can hear a voice on the edge of hearing. A faint, mimicking whisper, calling out for help from the deep places in the woods. I know what it is. It's a predator, ancient and intelligent. It uses our own best instincts, our compassion, our desire to help, our adherence to the relaces its hunting ground. It set a trap for a hiker and it worked. Then it used that hiker's face and voice to set a trap for me. It learned from me. It recorded my voice, my methods, my protocols. And now it has that knowledge. It's still out there, in the deep, silent places, evolving, practicing, waiting. Perhaps it's waiting for another lost hiker. Or perhaps this time it's waiting for a ranger. It knows my voice now. It knows my name. And one day, I fear, a call will come over the radio from a man who sounds exactly like me, begging for help. And I wonder who will be brave or foolish enough to answer. Thank you for listening to this entry of the Wilderness Protocol. The woods are deep, and not all who wander are lost. Some are bait. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more accounts from the strange and unseen corners of the wild, please consider subscribing to the channel. Hit the bell icon to be notified of our next protocol. Stay safe out there. Check your maps, trust your gut, and if you hear something that sounds too good to be true, probably is. Until next time.